This programme is sponsored by Mouse Mesh, the humane way of keeping mice out of your home. Air brick covers come in 3 different colours and sizes, shaping the future of pest control.
Right, so we come on to the next section, which is fossil images. There is quite a large school of thought which thinks that the NASA archive does contain fossil images, and people who look at these often say, well, this is proof that there was once life on Mars. In the hypothesis, we're agreeing with the first observation that yes, there are fossils in NASA's archive.
In these images, yeah.
But this could equally mean that they've accidentally been photographed on Earth. Now, one person who's looked at this sort of evidence extensively is a guy called Charles Schultz. And he, in his book, A Fossil Hunter's Guide to Mars, makes the assertion that Mars was once full of life because it's full of fossils. And we can show some of the examples on the screen. Let me just read a few quotes from A Fossil Hunter's Guide to Mars. Charles Schultz says, "What I present here is evidence of fossilized sea life on Mars. In the course of describing these fossils, I may refer to them as sea urchins, shark's teeth, or other terrestrial forms. However, they are not. These are only structurally identical to those organisms and are not in any way related to them. It is very likely that these creatures have absolutely no genetic relationship to the creatures we have on Earth. They are simply shaped by their environment to function in the same manner as marine creatures on the Earth. If I call something on Mars a sea urchin or a trilobite, be aware that the similarity is strictly morphological and is not endorsed in any manner as a scientific proof that these fossils are from sea urchins, trilobites, or any other terrestrial organisms. Their forms are the result of the fact that form and function go hand in hand." So he's saying that they've just evolved in the same way that they did on Earth,
yes,
in parallel, if you like. But what I've said in the hypothesis is, by making this statement, Schultz is showing that he is convinced the images he is examining are from Mars. If not, isn't surely the elephant in the room that he is actually looking at Earth fossils photographed on Earth? If Schultz is correct that the fossils seem identical to Earth fossils, which is what he's asserting, is it not an equally strong hypothesis that the images are from the Earth?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And Schultz goes on to state, and I think this is more key, the very agencies that are proclaiming their support for the search for alien life are the same organizations that are actively discrediting the discoveries that have been made. It begs the question, why? And I've provided a possible answer to that.
Yes.
A plausible answer to that question is that the discoveries are not genuine because they're from the Earth.
Yes.
That would be a reason for not wanting to admit them.
Yes.
Now then, let's go through.
And you know, the oddity is with this whole scenario is that discovering like microbial life and little fossilized organisms on Mars seems to me like a fairly tame discovery, you know, that they should be able to announce if indeed, you know, that was what they had actually discovered. In other words, what I'm saying is I find it extremely odd that NASA would not announce the discovery of microbial life, or rather, perhaps I should correct myself, because they did announce the discovery of microbial life in 1976, but then about a year or so later, they said that the experiment was flawed and the result was wrong. So why are they being so cagey about the discovery of even microbial life? You know, you'd think that that wouldn't be a threat to anybody to say that they discovered it.
And even fossils.
Yeah.
So what? There's some fossils on Mars.
There might be life.
Yeah. Is that such a big thing to sort of want to cover up?
Right. Because fossils doesn't equal aliens. You know, it's so.
And at the very least, what they could do is all of the things that Charles Schultz has found in these images. They could hold a conference and debate it on platforms and point out all of these anomalies. in the open,
Yes,
and then
indeed.
come to some conclusions.
Yes.
But they haven't done all of
They
that.
haven't done that. In fact, Charles Schultz has said in interviews that he was invited to conferences and then they cancelled him, or they cancelled the conference.
So the image here on the screen there, many experts agree is a crinoid fossil. And incidentally, the two scientists that looked at the document both said it looked like biology, right?
Yes.
Because they could not debunk this image, right?
Yes.
Okay, we move on to some of Charles Schultz's images.
Yeah.
So the first one here is, this is a quote from A Fossil Hunter's Guide to Mars. Marine fossils from Sol 009, microscopic imager on opportunity. From top left is a spiral shell, broken shell showing chambers and a scallop. From bottom left are what appears to be a shark's tooth. That's a type of shell, or, well, what is a shark's tooth? It's a remnant of biology, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah.
It's not literally a shark's tooth. It's just shaped like a shark's tooth, but it's a remnant of biology. Spiral shell, similar to a conch. These were found in Eagle Crater. But as you say, Andrew, wouldn't it be great if we had colour images and more high definition images?
Absolutely, because then we'd have more data to work with. So, again, there's a question mark as to why they haven't why we haven't been able to have colour images of these things.
The image on the right there, Schultz is claiming is like a sea gopher, and he's pointing out various aspects of it in that diagram. The next one is another crinoid fossil. So he's just marked out the shape there in the right-hand image. Crinoid is not a plant, it's an animal or a sea creature which swims about the sea, and you can see it there imprinted on this rock. Crinoid fossil. And further image here, this is a whelk shell according to Charles Schultz, and he's got a close-up there. These are just a selection of images I've taken from A Fossil Hunter's Guide to Mars.
Yes.
Some of the ones that I found more convincing. Let me just read this. Spirit seems to be in an area that had numerous species that are very similar to terrestrial marine organisms, both past and present. There are many seashells, some apparent urchins, crinoids, stromatolites, and what may be bones of larger animals such as reptiles, although that is speculative at this time. Altogether, it creates an image of a Mars that supported a large population of diverse organisms, but in all they appear to be aquatic and not land-dwelling. This would be consistent with the thin atmosphere and poor shielding from the radiation environment. More in-depth exploration will be needed on the planet to determine what part, if any, that land organisms played in this lost ecosystem. Now, again, another possible explanation is that it's in some previous marine area on the Earth, perhaps one of the areas where rover testing has been done.
And again, if you take the kind of logic that NASA wants to be self-sustaining in that it needs to attract funding for its future projects, then revealing these fossils that Charles Schultz had discovered would make a lot of sense, because that paragraph that you were reading there then kind of logically leads you on to, well, we need to have a different type of mission to specifically explore this region where the fossils are found, with new experiments on board, different approach to how we would sample the soil, or dig deeper or dig more, or maybe even a sample and return mission, which has been mentioned on a couple of videos. So that presents NASA with an ideal opportunity to actually get more projects on the books and get more funding, doesn't it? So why, for their logic, why would they want to just ignore those findings?
Yeah, their mission is not to land the thing on the Martian surface when they all jump up and down and pat each other on the back. That's not the end of the mission. The mission is to look for life.
Yes.
But it seems that they're not interested in finding life.
That's what it seems like to me.
Right, now I'm going to show some unexplained or some bizarre anomalies now in some of the images. Now, whenever you get anomalies on Mars, it's explained away as event effect, which you find these on Earth. We've just seen some images there. This is where you get strong winds and sand is blown up and blows over the surface of rock, and it makes the surface smooth, and you get very rounded edges or circular holes and this kind of thing. And yes, I'm inclined to believe that some of the anomalies are ventifacts.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't mean they're ventifacts on Mars, though. It could mean it's an Earth ventifact.
Right.
So this image here, we see that the object in the middle there, which looks like it has sort of very regular concentric, sort of donut-shaped profile on it. I'll just give it a close-up there. And we see another ventifact below, where you can see the wind has possibly eroded this piece of rock. Now, the landscape we see there in the next image also shows the same ventifact, and there's another close-up of it. These images we also featured, Gary McKinnon was talking about these images, but the next one, which is a close-up of image section A, is that a ventifact? Looks a bit peculiar. Did you read anything into that image, Andrew, the top one here?
Well, I looked at some of these and it didn't really stand out to me as anything really obvious. But, you know, I will just add that there are a number of surface anomalies which seem to show structure which doesn't appear to be geology, it's something else, you know. And Richard Hoagland has some of these on his site too, where it looks like we've got bits of machinery or something, or bits of devices laying on the ground, and they are very interesting when you look at them. And even those images on Hoagland's site were from Pathfinder mission.
Right.
So yeah, there are a lot of and that's a hexagonal image you're showing there. So
so this is from Charles Schultz's pointed this out from Fossil Hunter's Guide to the Mars. I'll just give the caption. He says 3 mysteries in one shot. The top object has 5 concave sides in a perfect pentagon, and the centre has a round hole dead centre. Object is hollow and its walls wafer thin. The left pentagon object shows perfect linear edges precisely at the angles of a perfect pentagon. The bottom right object is shaped like a rind and is one of about 2 dozen that I have found. So he's saying that he thinks that this is biology with the pentagon shape, which occurs in biology.
Yeah.
Now here's another very peculiar image. The red square there, if we just zoom in on that, answers on a postcard what this is in this image. What do you think of that one, Andrew? It's a dumbbell shape.
Yeah, I mean it's fairly indistinct. So
you don't think it's something regular which has been machined or anything like that?
Difficult to say, I think. I would say that's difficult to say myself.
All right.
But
okay, we'll move on to the next one. Now I think this was featured in mainstream media, this particular one.
Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure it was in the Daily Mail, yeah.
And it is a genuine Mars rover image. It's from the Opportunity rover, and there's a close-up. And do you think that can be passed off as geology?
Well, that's really tough. I mean, I suppose one could argue that it's a larger rock and the sun is at a certain angle and so forth. But it does look like a dome.
I've put an arrow on the right hand of the screen here just to point out that it appears to be a smaller dome.
Yes. Yeah.
And the question I'm asking in the hypothesis is, could we be looking at one of these, which is the sort of accommodation units that they install in the desert or in the Canadian Arctic or wherever they're doing their rover testing to house equipment or even to live in.
Yes.
And they always have a domed top, as we can see there. Now, I'm not saying it's exactly like those. They might be different types of accommodation hub.
Yeah.
Right? Is it an accommodation hub of the Mars rover testing team?
Yeah.
Or is it a protection for some sort of satellite dish?
Yeah. I mean, you could make a number of sort of guesses as to what it might be. And I think the frustrating thing, again, is that we don't, if you write to somebody at NASA and ask for an explanation of what that is, you generally don't get a response, or you'll get, I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm being unfair, but the explanations I've received for some of these images which show structures certainly have not been satisfactory to me, and none of them have come from NASA.
Right. The next section, which I've left in from the previous hypothesis, which I'll skip over because we've already been through it, is just this image which appears to show anomalies in the dust on the solar panels, which one of them coincidentally is the same size and shape as a thumbprint.
Yeah.
So we're saying that there's no way that once the things left the Earth that someone could come and leave their thumbprint in the dust, and the dust is clearly being created after the things left the Earth.
Yes.
So it's not possible to get a thumbprint in there.
Yes, yes. And there's actually another image which is from either the Spirit or Opportunity mission where there appears to be a footprint. It's near where the rover landed, and you see the rover's turned back to look at the where the landing package has kind of unfurled itself, and there's what looks like a footprint in the soil, or a boot print, I should say, rather than a footprint.
Right.
That is also an intriguing image.
Right. Perhaps I can add that to the hypothesis, because I wasn't aware of that one. Again, we've covered the colours argument in a previous show, but just to quickly skim through it, that was the first image which came back from the Viking mission, nice blue sky and slightly reddish sort of soil, and they said, oh, we made a mistake, it should have looked like that.
Right.
So they've used a false colour image in the second image for some bizarre reason. As I say, we've been through the colours, and the scientific reason for colouring these images is because you can examine the geology or other features using filters or colour substitution rather than using a true colour image. That's their excuse
that's their basic argument.
99% of the images coming back with this red tinge to them.
Yes.
And we can see here in some of these images, people have actually corrected the colours to show you what the sky really should look like in these images. And again, in the hypothesis, I say, well, haven't they just taken a photograph on Earth and they've added a red colour on it to make it look like an alien planet?
Yes.
That to me seems like using Occam's razor.
I mean, I spoke about this several years ago, and I was really coming at it from the angle of the rovers really were on Mars, and they were covering up that it was like the Earth. So I hadn't at that point considered, again, as we were saying earlier, like some of the other researchers, I hadn't considered that they'd faked the rover missions and the rovers were really on Earth. And again, we've still got some more stuff to go through about the engineering problems and so forth.
Now, I'd just like to point this one out, which was highlighted in A Fossil Hunter's Guide to Mars. They've not only used the wrong colours in this image, they've destroyed some of the detail, apparently. This is the caption. NASA's press release version of Burns Cliff made using infrared as a colour and destroying the contrast and image sharpness. The sky has been literally erased and painted over, then blurred into the crater edge. There is no good technical or scientific reason for this representation. The colours are so far off that it barely qualifies as a picture of Mars. And this is what the image should look like. Okay, Burns Cliff, the true colour image. So why are they doing this to their images? Again, kind of the standard conspiratorial view is, they're covering up the fact that the skies are blue on Mars, but we're suggesting in the hypothesis, no, it's just that the thing's taken on Earth. Now, we've been through the impossible weather, and there's argument over whether there's water on Mars. And people have said that at certain temperatures and pressures, you would get water or perhaps light rain or even ice and snow on Mars. So we go into it in detail in the hypothesis. So I'll skip past this part. You can look that up if you want to read it. You can download the hypothesis, incidentally, from this link. And anyone who wants to either add to it or come back with some comments to try and explain the evidence, because we're trying to build this hypothesis over a period of time into a piece of evidence. Now, this image looks at what appears to be a fake sand dune. I discussed this one with Gary McKinnon. Did you look at this one, Andrew?
I did, yes, and it does look as if it's somehow being photoshopped or something. It's quite a dark image, I thought, and I didn't actually try and lighten it up myself. But it does look like some type of manufactured or photoshopped dune. Yeah, I'd agree. It does look a bit weird.
The question is, why do they need to do that? Why do they need to remove a large portion of the image and replace it with a fake sand dune? Is it covering up their bunkhouse?
That's it. Again, you wonder, like the dome image we looked at a couple of minutes ago, are they covering up something like that and airbrushing that out?
This program is sponsored by MouseMesh. If you're in the construction industry, we've introduced MouseMesh, inbuilt with interchangeable fronts, 6 different colours and stainless steel.